Thank you, Alison, for the introduction, and welcome, Becky. Thrilled to have you here for this last conversation of the day. So welcome. And we're here really to address the question, what do CEOs want from financial services marketers? But before I do, I'm going to do the This Is Your Life moment, if I may, just to give everyone a bit of background about Becky, if you don't know her already. So born in Cambridge, raised in Sheffield, a degree in economics and business management, Newcastle University. Started at Barclays on the grad scheme, where he spent 3 years, am I right? Where exploring the idea of being an economist. 3 years later, decided he didn't want to be an economist. And serendipity took you up to Coventry, where you actually started working for Barclays on a very small team to launch PC banking. And I didn't actually.
Age now, Alex.
I'm sorry, I didn't realise that Barclays were the first major high street to actually launch banking on your computer at home, which just seems like a different era. You absolutely loved it, and I think that was a turning point in your career, because I think that's when you really inspired your passion and curiosity into really understanding customers and then how to use technology to really meet their needs. So that was the starting point. So although you've worked in FS a lot, you've also dipped into media and publishing onto our side of the fence, as well as retail, and actually latterly at Boots, where you were head of digital experience, and that's where you pivoted across to HSBC, where we find you today, 7 years later. And when you first started HSBC, I think it's fair to say that you felt the biggest challenge was to make sure HSBC was relevant to the new generation. Yes. 7 years down the line, have you succeeded in that? Maybe that's a question we'll come to later.
That's a big question.
But you started off as head of retail proposition and current accounts, moved into group head of customer marketing for wealth and personal banking. And then for the last 2 years, you've held the CMO role for HSBC UK across retail and corporate banking. And I think it's fair to say you're very well respected within the industry for your innovation and the transformational approach you take to marketing. And that's been recognised recently by some awards. So Marketing Week as Top 100 Most Effective Marketer and Campaign Power 100 Marketers List. So huge congratulations. So I think you'll agree, a pretty amazing CV. And on that note, we're sort of going to get into the questions. So you ready? You're now in the hot seat. So although financial services brands have very much been dominant in your career, as we've mentioned, you have worked within retail and publishing. First of all, what attracted you out of FS into those? And then what did you gain from those and bring back into financial services?
So two different reasons for stepping out of FS, actually. The first was, quite bluntly, I got to a point in my career where I'd been working for Abbey National as it was taken over by Santander. And I was sort of thinking about, is this where I want to stay? I'd been there about 6 years. And I thought if I didn't leave financial services now, I'd leave it in a box. So I just wanted to go and do something different. And the industries at the time, the sectors at the time that were doing really innovative stuff and investing heavily in digital were really travel, media, and retail. Mm-hmm. So I looked at all of those three sectors, and actually the opportunity to go and then work for a very different type of organisation. I worked for a privately run media company that was family owned by sort of like a lord who owns a large chunk of Hampshire. So a much smaller organisation. To go and actually lead their digital transformation was just a great opportunity to do something completely different. Boots was slightly different. Again, Boots was Boots is one of those brands. I don't know if everybody around the audience is. You kind of walk down and you talk about, somebody says to you, "Oh, Boots," and you go, "I love Boots. I absolutely love Boots." And then somebody says, "When did you last buy something from Boots?" And you kind of go, "Oh, I'm not sure, because I get my shampoo from here and I get something else from there, and I'll put it in the basket or it gets delivered in a van." So Boots was, when I was approached by Boots, it was one of those really interesting roles to go, a brand that is absolutely loved. And much as many of us here love the brands we work for, not everybody in the public loves the brands we work for. So to work for a brand that was almost universally loved in a very different operation that was dealing with physical product and at the cusp of, Boots was behind on its e-commerce journey at that point in time. So again, a great opportunity to go and see what I could do in a different environment completely.
And from those learnings, what have you brought back to HSBC? What are the two top things that you think? The two top things that sort of I carry with me are one, that working in financial services, we sometimes forget how blessed we are.
in terms of resource and data. So I think really interesting conversations earlier today about data and actually having seas, not just lakes of data, but seas of data. Boots went out and created the ad card in order to understand who on earth their customers were. We don't have to do that in financial services. We know who our customers are. We just don't necessarily use the data well enough or operationalize that data well enough. So that's something for me that is that you don't look that gift horse in the mouth so often, and really appreciate what you've got and try and leverage that. And the other thing that I learned is that different industries do have very different cultures. So I probably shouldn't say this to you, Alex, but working with journalists was the biggest eye-opener that I ever had going and working in a small media company, and trying to actually transform a newsroom from a daily newspaper operation into a 24/7 was the most enormous cultural shift. So having worked in financial services a lot prior to that, where effectively everybody's risk and finance really, and as a marketer you're a bit odd. So really recognising how different industries are culturally, and how normal it feels for you when you're in it, and how different it feels when you step out, is something that I've carried with me a lot.
Thank you. And we were saying at the beginning how you're responsible for both retail and corporate. I mean, your portfolio is huge because your remit is across M&S Bank, First Direct, as well as the Red Hexagon.
Yes.
How have you structured your marketing team to deal with such a wide portfolio? And what do you think the biggest challenge you faced when you first started in creating the right structure?
I would say that I think we're still creating the right structure, and we're evolving, and we've talked about SVB today and so on in terms of sort of like HSBC as a group and what we're doing. The key thing really though is to make sure, and again, if it was fascinating some of the conversations earlier, so I sat at the table nodding my head a lot,
is really taking notes.
have to ensure that you have people within the marketing organisation who are deeply embedded within and understand the business that they're working with and supporting and that they're helping to drive growth for. And then you need specialists for certain elements of delivery. So the way, in my mind, the way that we're sort of looking at the team is around actually relationship leads who are really heavily embedded in the day-to-day. What are we designing? Who are we for? Why do they want us? What does the product proposition look like? What do we need to do with that? And then actually we sort of separate out into specialist skill sets around communication, delivery, media and marketing planning, and so on and so on. So you almost have sort of two slightly separate parts of the team, one which serves all elements of our business, so corporate, retail, private bank, the different brands, and one which is very, very heavily embedded in those business in terms of how do I understand you deeply and ensure that we're able to either bring the insights that we have, bring the experience we have, bring the data we have to bear in terms of product proposition, experience design, but also then able to actually understand who are we targeting and why, and then what's the best go-to-market strategy. So that's kind of how we blend what we do in terms of that probably classical marketing capability in terms of marketing communication capability, but actually the more strategic relationship piece as well.
And that's interesting because that leads on to my next question really well, because most people just have one CEO that they have to manage upwards. You've got more than one. So in terms of that structure and the relationship with the CEOs who also think they know everything there is about marketing, how do you manage those dynamics? What are the trade secrets?
Sometimes I go and shut myself in a room and have a little cry. No, it's never that bad. It is trying to understand, and this is why it's so important that the team understand what our businesses need, and sometimes what they need is not what they want, but actually then being able to be, again, it said earlier, being very clear around why something is worth looking at or not. Really positioning in terms of respect the profession that we have and our professionalism and why we're here to do the job around marketing. One of the really clear conversations, my UK CEO, Ian's a fabulous guy, and the conversation I've had with him is like, I don't need you to like it, but I need you to understand why we would do it and why it will work, and then let me show you the results. And if the results aren't there, I'll stop it. And he's excellent around that in terms of, there's a couple of things we've done, he's going, I really don't like that. And it's like, but it's not targeted for you. So and he's great. You can have that very sensible conversation with him. Others, it's slightly different, but it's really trying to understand what motivates them, what they need to be able to do. Is the risk piece in banking is always there. So the reputational risk. How can you mitigate any risk, and how do you actually enable to have an early view on how something might be landing, so that people can feel comfortable with it rather than sort of feel blindsided. But my dad used to play a game with us when we were young called Fact or Opinion. I think based on me probably coming home from school at some point and saying so says such and such, and he would say it's a beautiful sunny day outside. Fact or opinion? And I go, fact. It's a sunny day. And he'd go, no, because if you don't like sunshine, it's not a nice day, is it? So trying to actually get into that conversation about it makes my dad sound very old, doesn't it? He was an amazing man.
Great.
But being able to actually talk to people about this is the facts that we have and this is where it's opinion is what I found enormously helpful.
So the data, so we're talking about data earlier, is so
ground it in
important.
data, but then enable people to talk about, and I know there's an opinion. And again, somebody talked about, don't talk to me about all the science in marketing. Trying to talk about there is science in marketing and there's art, and those are the bits that we need to bring together. And I'll show you the science, but you have to kind of trust me a bit more on the art. It's a really interesting conversation to have, particularly coming back to it with bankers who are often much more financially oriented or risk oriented.
That's where your Economist experience actually stands you in very good stead because you enjoy numbers. But what are the most, above that actually, because obviously data interpreting and that storytelling, the science and the gut feel are really valuable. What are the other skill sets you think CMOs need today to drive the needs of the brand, but also meet the needs of the CEO?
I think they need you to be able to bring clarity to things that are going on, focus, constructive challenge, and really deep ability to collaborate. So I'd say that one of the things that I can do at HSBC in the UK in the role that I do is I can see across lots of things, which surprisingly few, we talked again earlier about the silos in FS, which is very true. There's very few people who can do that. They are very deeply embedded in the business that they're in. So I it's a blessed position actually to be able to look across and go, well, that looks really similar to that, looks really similar to that. So if you bring that together, you could actually do it better or you could do it differently. So being able to connect and collaborate and draw across, I think, is a key skill that CEOs want and will need from financial services marketers going forward, as supporting those silos becomes more and more difficult.
Is that the same across all sectors, do you think, or specific to
I think it's
FS?
Particularly pertinent in FS. It's relevant in all sectors, certainly the two sectors I've worked in, but it is not as acute as in FS. I think the other bit is adaptability and agility and resilience, and actually, frankly, a sense of humour sometimes.
Totally, especially in the world we live in today. One of the sessions we had earlier today is obviously around trends, and at the session on ESG that Nikki and Santosh, who you've worked with, were on. What do you think are some of the most pressing trends facing financial services marketers at the moment outside of sustainability?
I think one of the pressing trends is how relevant are banks in the form that we have them, particularly on the retail side of the business, to consumers coming up. So I had a fascinating conversation with somebody a few weeks ago, which was talking about sort of reinventing your brand, and really talking about that so many people and sort of like so many kids in the sort of like 12 to 20 age group, they have no idea who HSBC is. No idea. Not relevant to them, not really aware. So how do you reinvent? How do you let go of some of the things that you think are so important about your brand to become more relevant? So I think that trend away but the bit that I come back to is, again, the conversation was grounded in the conversation around most people say they don't need a bank anymore. And my kind of aha moment was, yes, but everybody needs banking. So our job is to be less bank-like and offer banking in a way that people want it. So you might not think you need a bank, but everybody needs banking in some way, shape or forms. However you define it. So I think there's a real trend away from the sort of like this idea of I need a bank. I think the ability to atomize your money is quite an interesting thing, to go have money in lots of different places. Equally, I think there is a massive trend around actually that's just too complicated for people, and how can banks play a role in enabling people to become more financially confident and become more financially resilient. I think we're seeing that through cost of living. I think AI, as we've just talked about, it kind of excites me and terrifies me in equal measure, in terms of what the art of the possible could be, and whether that possible is constructive or not. So I think AI will fundamentally shift how we engage with each other and with money, and fundamentally we're in the business of how people engage with money. I think in the corporate side of things, again, I think actually things like blockchain are going to have more and more and more and more of an influence. So a number of different things that are playing out. But I just think consumer expectation is the biggest piece, is actually, and I think the slide right at the beginning of today that said, do you think your consumer experience is sort of keeping up with what customers want or behind? And it got bigger. For me, that is a massive piece, is actually one of the biggest trends for banks is consumer experience, whether it be on the B2C side or the B2B side, is the expectations going up and up and up and up. And can you actually keep pace?
And how do you, my next question was obviously the radical journey you've been on at HSBC, because you've been through a huge transformation over the last 5 years. What are you doing to prepare for that next radical transformation, to maintain that relevance, embrace AI, metaverse in the most brand purposeful way that actually adds value to the customer? Because it's not necessarily, to your point, about the brand, it's about the customer experience.
I think the key things for us are that we're on a big journey of simplification. We are a very big, complicated business, like many of the businesses in the room. And actually what we found is we do lots and lots and lots of things. So sort of if you looked at our retail product portfolio, it's very, very large. You probably need it to be significantly less than that. So how do you actually simplify your business to create the space for you to do some of the different things? Mm-hmm. I think the other journey for us that is really, really critical is particularly in the UK part of HSBC. It's very, very different in Hong Kong. But in HSBC in the UK, we are seen as quite corporate and remote, as opposed to sort of cuddly and warm, which some of the financial services brands are. And so for us, there's a really big job of work to be done to reground ourselves in the fact that our role in the UK is to help build the financial health of the UK, and actually HSBC is not too big to care. HSBC is big enough to make a difference, and by our sheer scale, if we get behind something, we can really have an impact. And actually it's about being focused on what those things are and making sure we have a real impact. Mm-hmm. So some of the biggest themes for us in terms of continuing to transform are simplify, focus on the things where we can make the biggest difference and understand our customers deeply and focus on the things that matter to them.
What have you done in that space that you're most proud of? Because I know from our conversations have won, but I'd love for you to share that with the audience.
One of the things that we've done is we have insourced our media, our paid search media. So we have to try and really get hold of that, we have a small dedicated team that focuses entirely on maximising our paid search. We're talking about this on the table. We have some incredible support from Google actually in terms of continuing to upskill and develop that team as well. But enabling us to actually bring that in, be very focused on what we want to do and really driving outcomes through that. That's been super, super helpful. I'm trying to think which thing I'm talking to you about now.
Just what you were doing externally in the market of things that you're proud about. So the financial inclusion, that's sort of authenticity and really leaning into
the relationship with Shelter.
Really,
we've had a relationship with Shelter as a business for really it coincided with us moving our UK head office up to Birmingham. So when ring fencing happened, we took a deliberate decision, HSBC, to separate the UK headquarters from the global headquarters. So global headquarters is next door. The UK bank is based out of Birmingham, which is where Midland Bank originally came from, and so on. There's a terrible homelessness problem in central Birmingham. I don't know how any of you go up to Birmingham, but it is a visible problem for people sleeping rough, sleeping in the streets, all outside Newt Street Station, all the way up to, we were building a very lovely flash head office. And that's what triggered a relationship with Shelter to go, well, how can HSBC help in Birmingham particularly? It's become nationwide. As we work with Shelter, one of the things that became really, really clear is whilst we are regulatory required to provide basic bank accounts for customers, actually if you have no form of identification or fixed address, we cannot legally open a basic bank account even for you, because we fall foul of anti-money laundering laws. So we worked with Shelter to create a capability that we could effectively Shelter almost operating almost like a apprentice. Their shelters, their refuges we are able to use the address there with Shelter almost standing guarantor to enable us to open accounts for people without a fixed address. And the research that we've done with Shelter and what we've done with Shelter actually shows very clearly that if you don't, it is a vicious circle, and this is why we did an advert around it. Is if you no bank account, no home, no address, no address, no bank account, no job, no home, and it goes round and round and round and round. So you have to somehow break that. So we're very, very proud of the work that we've done with Shelter. I have to be honest, a lot of that work was nothing to do with my marketing team initially in terms of the fixing that problem. We have a phenomenally dedicated financial inclusion and vulnerability team who did a lot of that work. But what we were able to do is go, when you've actually got something that powerful, we were able to say that is such a strong manifestation of the brand and something that nobody would think HSBC would ever do. And we've seen this in focus groups where people go, do they really? Is that HSBC do that? And literally walk out going, I'm going to see if my bank does that. Not because it's for them, but because it's actually a manifestation of trying us demonstrating we are big enough to make a difference. So.
It is very powerful. So talking about HSBC UK specifically, obviously you've just acquired SVB in the UK. Why? Where is the alignment? What are the benefits, and how is it going to add to HSBC's capabilities?
I think many of you will have seen sort of lots of the coverage in the press from sort of Noel Quinn and Ian Stewart and Stuart Tate and so on. Why? We were already probably much more heavily invested in parts of the tech and life sciences sector than many people would think and know. We launched a hundreds of millions of pounds worth of growth fund last year for startups and technology-based businesses. It has been an area that we have wanted to grow in for a long time, and SVB UK is a fantastic business. And their growth ambitions align very closely with HSBC. So it's very early days, but we're very excited about the about SVB becoming part of the broader SVB UK becoming part of the broader HSBC family. And a key. I mean, there's huge benefits for both elements.
Watch this space as that story unfolds. We're okay on time, still good. We will try and do some questions at the end for the audience, so start thinking what they might look like. Christoph just chaired a really interesting session about the marketing teams of the future. How are you helping to prepare your team for what's coming down the pipelines in terms of future marketing within HSBC?
It's a great question. It's really difficult, actually. Within HSBC, we have the most amazing array of training, and we have an HSBC University campus up in Birmingham. We have the most amazing sets of online training. Very, very little to do with marketing. So we kind of create that ourselves. Or we go to other partners, which again is one of those strange things. We're a relatively small number of professional marketers, but again, what I'm keen to do is have more flow between marketing and business units than we potentially have in the past. I actively encourage people. I'm passionate about people having development plans. Going, where are you now? Where do you want to be? How do you get better in your job? Where do you want to grow? And so what we then try to do is align training and investment to the development plan. We will do all sorts of things like standard lunch and learns, where we'll have deep dive sessions in terms of training. We work a lot with our partners like Meta, like Google to help keep us up to speed. But equally what we'll also do is invest in individual training through things like, whether it be from something like the mini MBA from Mark Ritson, a lot of marketing society work, Marketing Academy. We have a number of people who have gone through all of those programs, and we continue to do that in order to actually enable people to keep developing and keeping growing. We also do lots of specialist training, people for specific in-role training. But what we always try to do, and what I encourage teams to always do, is have a development plan so that you can actually put the case for this is why I want this investment. We did have a model for a while where it was like everybody gets a day a month for training and development. And if I'm really honest, what we found is that nobody really used it. There was one or two people who used it brilliantly, and the vast majority of the team didn't. So we've stepped away from that and said, basically, if it's a 3-week course or a 3-month program and it takes more than a day a month, if that's the right thing for you in your development, go do. If it's not, then don't just try and sort of have this notional idea. It's actually you can have more or less. Let's make sure it's right for you. So that's what we've tried to do, is make it much more personalised to you, your role and your ambitions.
And how do you do that for yourself? Because often as a CMO, you're expected to know everything and guide everybody else. But how do you make sure that you personally develop and get the time to train? I mean, you're not traditionally trained in the marketing space. No. So if you could do 3 things for yourself over the next sort of 18 months, what would it be to help your own personal development?
I've already spoken to Sherilyn about this. So I'd love to do the marketing fellowship because I think that's a deep grounding. I would actually like to do some work around understanding AI better. I feel that I have a sort of a blind spot. I don't understand it well enough. The biggest thing though for me on an ongoing basis is mentoring. And I learn more. I do something called open sessions with my team. It's like, just put time in my diary and talk to me, and we do it sort of like a couple of times a month. So that anybody in the team could just come, and I learn so much. So I don't know if my team enjoy it, but I really enjoy it because I get to learn much more detail. You can talk to me about something you're working on, talk to me about career, but it's actually very indulgent for me because I learn so much more about my team, what's motivating them, how I can help them, how I can kick things. And my job really is not about being a fantastic marketer, thank God, because I won't be very good at that. But my job is to help navigate and get things out of the way so that my marketers can be fantastic marketers. And so that's what I do in terms of open sessions. But mentoring and me mentoring people is actually, it's as much about what I learn from them as they can learn from me.
And do you have a mentor for yourself outside of HSBC or even outside of financial services?
I have had in the past. Right now, not. It's really funny because I kind of you blur the line between sort of old bosses that you've worked for that you still keep in touch with and go, are they a mentor, are they an old boss, and so on. So there's a number of people that I'm still in touch with that I've worked with and for in the past.
It's great that you make time for yourself because quite often that's the first thing that goes. We've got to wrap up. Have we got time for one question? One question, anybody from the floor? Crystal.
Becky, what's your single most important leadership hack that you can give to anyone in this room in terms of being a great leader, not a good leader, not only a good leader?
I would say, said she, that I'm gonna fudge it a little bit. There's 2 things for me. I think that the ability to take a deep breath, go, this too shall pass, and then have a laugh about it. It's probably the biggest thing that I would say, because it immediately enables everybody. If you can do that, it enables everybody else just to then stop, breathe, and think calmly about a situation. So I think that, and if you can ensure that in stressful times you don't add to the stress as a leader, that's really important.
Thank you, Becky.
Well, I've been given the nod. Becky, thank you so much. That was fascinating. Thank you.